Megyn Kelly is left pondering things after Ben Shapiro issues a big warning about JD Vance. All right, guys, you're going to like this one. I know I did. It's always fun to see different perspectives around conservative politics being discussed because that's how we think, and who doesn't like that? But first, everybody, please make sure you like our video, share it around, and subscribe to the Resist the Mainstream YouTube channel. That way, we can keep bringing you guys these great clips. So thank you so much, and we really do appreciate it. As always, I'm your host, Darian. Let's get into the video.
If Trump loses this election, will people look back and say he never should have agreed to that debate? They could have kept Biden behind closed doors. The enthusiasm would have stayed low. He wouldn't have had a reason to force, Biden out of the race. I hadn't thought about it that way at all, but I can see the logic. The second point on this tweet that I'm not remembering who's the author of it, but was that the second mistake that Trump has made in this race was picking JD Vance. And I know you raised a similar question, and without regard to whether people like JD or don't like JD or wanted JD or didn't want JD, that's a question worth exploring now that the race has changed and Biden's out and Kamala's in, because now it's going to be all about race. It's going to be all about gender. Every little comment, not just JD or Trump make about women or minorities, will be blown up as front page news items for days. But anything any Republican says, it was like some Republican talking head on CNN said something which they spent a week hitting on from the Kamala Harris team. So never mind if it comes from the vice president or the presidential nominee. So what do you think of that second question?
So, do I think there's only one rule with vice presidential candidates, and that is they shouldn't be able to damage you. Meaning that the vice presidential candidates rarely have an upside. There's always this talk of like, you're going to pick a VP, the VP is going to win his home state. That really doesn't materialize very often at all. Nate Silver tried to quantify this. He suggested that maybe a vice presidential candidate in best case scenario might be worth like 0.4 of a percentage point in their home state. So again, I don't think that you can count on your VP to really add this massive upside to your candidacy. The one thing you can do is sort of damage control. I don't think that JD is like a massive downside guy. I just think of the pick of JD, and again, I think JD is brilliant, but I think that the pick of JD is more of a blown opportunity by Trump. So let's go back a couple of weeks to the RNC, and Trump is beating the hell out of Biden in the polls. Let's say that instead of going JD, he goes, say, Glenn Youngkin, right? Who's the kind of the last alternative pick, and the one who I understand Susie Wiles, who's his campaign manager, was pushing for. So Youngkin is a relatively popular governor of a purple state, deeply inoffensive to pretty much everybody across the aisle. They would have attacked him, but he'd already been battle tested because he'd already run a very rough gubernatorial race in Virginia. And let's say that Trump had done two things. Let's say he picked JD, that he picked Youngkin rather, and let's say that his acceptance speech had gone 35 minutes and not 93. Let's say that he had told his story of the assassination attempt, said a couple more words about unity, and then stopped. I think there's a good shot the election's over no matter what, because the feeling of momentum that Trump is actually a unity candidate, bringing the party together, trying to open new spaces for the Republican Party, as opposed to doing with JD what I think everyone sort of agrees was a legacy pick, an attempt to turn Trump personally into a Trumpism, or bring somebody on who's very personally loyal to Donald Trump. I don't see exactly what JD as a pick did. I said this at the time. I'm not sure what it did as a pick to add votes to the Trump coalition. Trump already does amazing with exactly the Rust Belt audiences that JD mostly appeals to in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. In fact, Trump has wildly outperformed JD in the one state where they both competed, in Ohio. And by the way, so did Mike DeWine, right? Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, who's way too moderate for most Republicans. That guy won his gubernatorial race by 20 in the same election cycle where JD won by 6. So,
by the way, that's the reason why Vivek Ramaswamy will not be the next senator from Ohio, because Mike DeWine is not going to pick him.
A couple of quick considerations here. One, yeah, Youngkin was tested, sure, but he also was viciously attacked by the leftist media, and they were even trying to call him a Trumper, even though him and Trump weren't even getting along back then. So that is worth considering. Now, I will say, Youngkin could possibly be a strategic pick in Virginia, given that that is such a contested state, and Trump did lose it by not a whole lot in 2020. Now, while the margin wasn't, say, around 10,000 votes, which perhaps would be the margin of, say, 0.4% of Virginia's adult population, you never know. It could end up being a really close race in that state. And let's not forget, Trump lost some states by razor-thin margins in 2020. Like, it's not even funny. We're talking about anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 votes in several swing states. So to say that Trump guaranteed us the Rust Belt locked up, I don't know. I mean, I hope so, but These are all things you got to question. And yes, I understand Virginia's not part of the Rust Belt. But the point is, any bit can help.
That's 100% right. So again, I think that the pick of JD is more a missed opportunity than it is like a massive downside pick. I also think that the beauty of Trump as a candidate is that there's nothing to attack him on because he's already been attacked on everything, right? As I've said about Trump for almost a decade at this point, he's a mud monster. So if you throw more mud at him, it's just more mud on the mud monster, and it's total. He's black socks. They never get dirty. The longer you wear them, the blacker they get, right? That's Donald Trump as a candidate. No matter what you do to Trump, it just looks like more Trump. The problem with bringing on a very fresh face who's never been battle tested in a gubernatorial race, for example, is that all this stuff is fresh. And JD is particularly fresh because all of us, I mean, you've said it, I've said, we've all said stuff over the course of our political careers that, don't sound great out of context. The thing is that most of us said it like 10 years ago. JD, because his trajectory was so short, he went from running a Senate race in 2021 to being the vice presidential candidate in 2024. That means your vetting period is super duper short. And so the time period when he went from, being on Tucker and saying kind of funny and inflammatory things to being the vice presidential candidate is incredibly short. Now, does that mean that it's not unfair? Of course, it's unbelievably unfair what they're doing to JD. They're deliberately misreading what he was saying. They're trying to now suggest that he is a weirdo. And again, I think that what that really is a defensive maneuver in order to prevent people from recognizing the true weirdo in this race is Kamala Harris. She's a weird lady.
And the Democrats.
Yes, it's a weird party, and she's a weird lady. And again, I mean that just in the typical sense, like the weird cackling, the strange smiling, the weird hand motions, the word salad straight from Soup Plantation, like all of it's weird. And then you juxtapose that with his family policy where he says basically it's good to have kids. Like that's supposed to be weird. She's with RuPaul's Drag Race doing Get Out to Vote. I mean, just on a raw level, that's a little weirder. It's like a little weird. So I think they're trying to sort of jujitsu this into JD is a weirdo. With all that put aside.
He's totally right on that. And I find it ridiculous that there are Republicans, yeah, you heard that right, Republicans, who will go and agree with the Democrats' characterization of him being weird and wag their finger in the face of, Trump and the MAGA base or whoever else and say, well, yeah, you guys picked weirdo and people know it. It's not working. Are you kidding me? We're talking about the party that literally supports child sex changes. Or like Ben Shapiro said, goes to RuPaul drag races as well, apparently. Yeah. See, if conservatives had any brains, they would immediately seize the narrative and say, you want to call us weird? Not going to happen. It's not just the child relations stuff too. How about their love of crime? I mean, let's be real, it's sick. We had the Lake and Riley thing, and Biden wouldn't even acknowledge it until so many people screamed at him at the State of the Union that he was forced to. It was an illegal immigrant that killed her. That was in because of Joe Biden and Democrat policies. There was no reason for that girl to die, but she tragically did die thanks to the very weird and crime-loving Democrats.
Do I think that Trump could have made a more politically savvy pick to win the election than JD? Yes, but I don't think that's what he was doing with JD.
I think there's a couple things on that pick. Yes, legacy pick, 100%. But I also think there's a real fear in the inner Trump circle that something could be done to Trump. That if the VP is too attractive to the establishment, to the intelligence community, that they could try to take Trump out in some way, shape, or form, whether it's it could be an assassination or something less. Right? I don't know exactly what I'm implying or what they're implying, but I know there's a real fear if the second in command is too attractive to the establishment, it endangers Trump. You go.
I mean, that was reported. I think the Wall Street Journal reported that Tucker actually said that directly to Trump. That you need to have like a VP insurance policy, somebody who's not going to be so wonderful that you get shot at. The reason I think that that's a particularly stupid line, just generally speaking, is they literally tried to shoot him the week before and he didn't have a vice presidential candidate. So I don't think it's about who he was going to pick for his VP. I think that people who want him to die just kind of want him to die. And it's not as though, oh my God, I'm thinking this thing through. If I shoot Trump, oh my God, I'm going to get JD and that's going to be so much worse. I probably better preserve Trump's life. I don't know that there's any assassin who thinks that way.
Well, you heard.
The problem with Shapiro's point right there is that he's discounting what would happen if Trump was killed before he had a VP. It's very obvious. This would go to the Republican Party. They would have to go coalesce around a new nominee. And the most likely pick, frankly, is probably Nikki Haley, who is establishment to the max, all right? Nikki Haley is funded by Boeing, Lockheed Martin, et cetera, et cetera. She loves war. She can't get enough of it. So it would make total sense for them to kill Trump before he had a VP pick. Now, if he had a VP pick that is assassination proof, perhaps they would think twice about it. as Ben Shapiro correctly pointed out, he did not have a VP pick at the time. Yeah, so it probably would have gone to Nikki Haley, who's an establishment pick and people love her. I fail to see his point there. And also in terms of him bringing up Tucker and Tucker being stupid, I will say there is some beef between Ben Shapiro and Tucker. Tucker Carlson famously essentially said that Ben Shapiro puts other countries' interests above that of America not too long ago. So I have a feeling it maybe was getting a little personal right there.
Don Jr. explicitly said when people were saying, pick Nikki Haley, he said that he'll be impeached in 2 seconds. In 2 seconds if he wins, if she's his number 2. And I take that point. I think that's part of the point they're making.
Right.
I mean, the only reason that I disagree with that is they would impeach him in 2 seconds if Mike Pence were his vice president. Because they did, twice. Like, again, I think that we're ignoring the control. The control here is that they will impeach him no matter what.
You don't think there's a greater temptation if you've got like a Haley or a Youngkin who they love? They don't love, but they loved Haley. And they would tolerate Youngkin more than, a MAGA type like JD.
Exactly.
I think it's an incremental temptation. Let's put it this way. They 99% want to impeach Donald Trump no matter what. And now they're like 99.4%, depending on who exactly is the vice president. I don't think that you select the vice president on the basis that they might be slightly nicer to you if you pick somebody who is slightly worse for them as vice president. Again, like if you're Trump and you're just gaming out how to win, like my main focus for Trump is how do you win, right? I'm a donor to his campaign. I want him to win. Like all of this is like assuming he wins. How about we get to like the part where he wins and then we worry about what comes next. I would like him to win.
But don't you think, Ben?
How about we get to the part where Trump wins and then what? We worry about whether he's going to get killed or not? Is that what Ben Shapiro's saying? Doesn't really make sense.
You and I, how many times were we on the air together in 15, 16, right? Back when I was at Fox. They would have done to a Youngkin, anybody. Name a Rubio, even a Nikki Haley. They would have done to them exactly what they're doing to JD. They take whatever they can, and they really wanted us to believe that Mitt Romney was a sexist pig because of binders full of women. We watched them do that. They would definitely do with Youngkin what they did with Romney and Bain Capital. He's made all this money. He exploits the little guy. He hates poor people. They'll find a different way in on each of these candidates. They would go with Nikki Haley with the Boeing and the corporate sponsorships, and she's on there's always something to go with. With JD, yes, he's made some, provocative comments because he recently rose to fame on cable news where you say provocative things. But I just don't think Trump would have been safer with one of these other guys.
All right, guys, we're gonna have to cut it off right there. But hey, hope you enjoyed it. I think it's, like I said, it's always interesting seeing the different perspectives within the conservative movement. So I really liked it. I'm sure you guys did too. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, guys, please be sure to comment below. Let us know what you liked about the video, what you want to see next, and we'll see you guys again soon. Thanks, and God bless.